Hello everybody, today is the 8th of September, the Flux Dev Meeting. So let me ask everyone to make sure that if they have any agenda items, to please add them now into the meetings doc. I will make sure I add a few myself. So let me... Yeah, I think I have one there. So if anyone else have any other items, please add them now. I think I'll crack on and start going through the board to start with, because that is always something we do. So let's do that now. Once I manage to share my screen.
I think we lost him.
Last time we had Paulo share his screen, his Zoom crashed. I think this is probably what happened again. Here he comes. You're back. And now your audio is not working. Dang. Cannot hear you. Still not. Hello. Cannot hear you.
What about now?
Perfect.
Yes?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Yeah, okay, let's crack on then. Sorry about that. Every time I try to share my screen, if I take too long to pick the screen to share, the whole thing collapses. So yeah, I just need to be quicker at this. Brilliant. So let's quickly go through the maintenance board and just show a few things that we closed recently. So yeah, I actually will open some of this. So this is something I opened a while ago, which was about some controllers, well, feeling like some controllers were not actually abiding by the timeouts, and it ended up being a red herring. This was actually a metrics issue rather than an issue on the controller itself. So I closed this. On the back of this, so I created this for two controllers, the customize and the image automation. But on the back of that, there was a PR I issued somewhere. Oh yeah, this one, which was mainly to improve the way that we output things on image automation controller. So in the image automation controller, we don't output anything, if there is a no op, which is not the same thing that we do for source controller. Source controller, it doesn't matter if you had like changes on your repository or not, you would always have a line on your logs, so it's easier for you to kind of compare your metrics with your logs. Because if you add the trace, then it's too much information. It's a lot harder for you to kind of cross reference them. Anyways, that is there now. So where is the other one? Yeah, this is what I just mentioned. Then one thing that I've been working around is on the fuzzing. We had a lot of issues on our fuzzers. Some of them were not building, and we received some alerts from Google on that. So some of the changes that I've done across most controllers and now were around this, pretty much to fix these problems and also to kind of get closer to Go native implementation of the fuzzing. So that would be pretty much this. Then this is actually one of the agenda items that, like I'll quickly open this on the notification controller. So on the migration into Go Native, a few things to think about. Actually, let me open that here as well quickly, notification controller. Just to go through a sample of this. So before, when we were doing the fuzz testing, the fuzzing was completely segregated. It was quite a bit of a pain to run it locally, and it was even harder for us to understand the scope of the test, and also to figure out, if it was working properly. A lot of things was based on the seed. So let me actually show that here. Yeah. So for example, on this case, we would have things like this based on a seed. And this seed was provided on the previous approach for fuzzing, right? The problem was, it was really hard to understand how likely it would go through specific execution paths, which means you would need sometimes 1 million executions to do a very small coverage. Now, with
sorry, Paolo, just real quick. I'm not seeing the seed that you're talking about. Are you?
Can you see here? Oh yeah, sorry. Let me share my.
Oh, you're probably sharing a different. Yeah. Gotcha.
Thank you for that.
No problem.
Can you see now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, thank you for that. Otherwise, I'll be, talking loads of things that wouldn't make much sense. Cool. So with that approach, it was really hard to kind of correlate what execution paths you actually activating and so on. With the Go Native, it's a lot simpler. Why? Because we have here our tests. The fuzzing part actually happens here, and then before that, we set a few test cases, right? And for our fuzzer, we're saying what input we have. So, for example, for Azure DevOps, we have token, we have URL, suffix, we have revision, severity, and reason. Those are the key things to activate most of our execution path. And then on top of that, one thing that we were not doing before is also fuzz the response of the APIs that we're talking to, right? So the interesting thing here is that then you can do really powerful stuff. So if I run this, we'll show that, the coverage here is quite big. Like even on the return from the APIs, we're covering pretty much most of the code here. And that is because I am, for example, saying that I need a specific return to activate a specific part of the execution path. And these will later become parts of what they call the corpus of the fuzzing test, which means they would be able to play this with other things, other random generated inputs, to actually exercise specific parts here and there. But it would be a lot easier for that to happen instead of just being by chance as it was before. So yeah, I think that these overall would make it a lot easier for us to test, and will also give us a lot more insight in terms of how we're testing things, and also again we'll have Google OSS Fuzz testing this for our own end, which is even better. Does anyone have any questions about the fuzzing or the changes we've done recently?
I do, just a little bit.
Oh yeah, go for it.
We're looking at it. Yeah. So if I'm understanding right, we're passing now the seed and the response into the actual fuzzing, the actual kind command that does the fuzzing, right? So that we can inspect, so that we can have a better sense of the stack trace from the beginning. Is that right?
It's not only that. So the key thing that we want to make sure here is when we're testing the fuzzing, well, when we have like a random input, that is actually covering as much of the application as possible. So for example, if I go back here and I run this again, we'll observe that, we run this new Azure DevOps, but then because we don't have a valid revision, that's it. Like we're not covering, it doesn't matter how much we change some of these things, we might never get to other parts of the code.
Right. So we're making sure that the pseudo random values, right, are
Exactly.
Make sure to cover the conditionals that we know are going to be in this fuzzer.
Exactly. Because if we can provide enough, different inputs to exercise the entirety of the execution path, then when the fuzzing takes over and starts adding random values, they know they have the capability to then test those execution paths. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Thank
Brilliant. No worries. And to be honest, fuzzing is quite a painful thing. With this, it's a lot easier to actually navigate, and also I definitely recommend folks to play around with it. Some things might feel like we're not testing our code, but we're testing someone else's code. But if it's our dependency, it doesn't matter if it's our code or their code. Like the whole chain gotta be secure, otherwise it's not secure at all.
Yeah, we're responsible for every dependency.
Overflow.
Oh, sorry.
A stack overflow is an overflow. They're all. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, that is that. I'm kind of rolling this out across most repositories. Some things are not great yet. I will actually. Can you guys see my browser now?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. So if I quickly just show maybe the other PR, the one on. No, it's not notification controller. Let me show on the image. Flutter controller. Yeah, so in some cases, I haven't completely changed the fuzzer. So for example, in the case of, let me actually open the code itself. I think that would be a lot easier. So if you go to controllers and go to this fuzzer here, so this is a mix of the new approach. So we have here, the new kind of signature and so on, and the fuzzing here. But a lot of it is actually, after that, is the old style of testing. And the reason for this is this controller will be rewritten as part of the rewriting exercise, and it's a bit of a waste of effort to make changes on this right now. Another thing that is quite hard to maybe understand at first when looking at these tests, especially the ones that they are so complex, is that these must run outside of the context of our project, because this is executed from upstream. Let me actually, maybe in one of these sessions, I should go in more detail how all this is implemented and so on. But I just want to kind of give a brief introduction on this. So basically, within OSS Fuzz, we have here configured how we kind of build each one of the fuzzers for each one of the projects, and it's all based on going through all the repositories we have. We do a checkout of each one of them, and then we run the build command, which is pretty much this OSS build from each one of the projects, and then that's it. This will generate some binaries which Google OSS Fuzz will then use to run the fuzzing. It won't have access to the files that we have on our repositories. It won't have, you know, anything about that. That's why we need to make sure we do things like this. For example, we get our CRDs, we embed them at that kind of build process time. We install testenv in one of these guys. Ensure dependencies, I think it is. Yeah, there we go. So we install that where it is running. You know, like, again, there's a lot of things that need to happen for this to work properly, especially upstream, which I'm not going to cover today in detail, but it's just for you guys to know, like, these complex tests, they will be gone, especially after the rewrite. But in the meantime, we have to bear with that. For cases like that, and as well, let me just cover a few things here. We have, so when you're running locally, you have three main targets. You have the build, the smoke test, and the native. Native will pretty much run as the native does, like in the same way that you do, like just clicking run on the IDE, but it will go through each one of them. The smoke test will make sure that everything will run properly once it goes upstream, and that's why it's so important. It's like make sure that this is building properly, and the build is pretty much kind of a dependence of the smoke test, so we don't need to worry about that too much. These tests that I covered are, you know, big and expensive and have all these dependencies. It also, we were not running them when we're running the native, and I'll just show where that is happening. I think that is here. We're pretty much removing the files that are not, that we don't want to cover right now. In the future, we'll just remove that kind of filter and so on. I think, yeah.
Paulo, just a another quick question. Sorry, folks, if this is turning into only a security team conversation, but the rewrite that you're talking about, this is part of finishing up that meta issue of refactoring the controllers based on the new controller standards. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason for that is once we have that done, we can test in a way smaller level. We don't need to, you know, be running end to end for fuzzing. And the reason why that is important is fuzzing is quite expensive. If you need to run the whole M test and have like loads of things running, waiting for them, it's just, it will just first be really slow, and second, it will generate a lot of false positives, and we definitely don't want that. Let me just see if I can show.
Just as a quick like follow-up. I mean, I know we're on the public call, but this is also part of a CNCF thing. There's a talk that several people are giving, some of whom are Flux maintainers too. At least one of whom is from AWS, Amin. We're going to be talking about controller standards, and I wonder if it would be good to have a quick check-in with you about this as one of the reasons, you know, that people might, the why, you know, there's a bunch of whys, and a lot of them have to do with standards. I feel like you just laid out a very compelling case for for why people would want to do that.
Oh no, that's for sure. And to be honest, there's a lot of things that the fuzzing give us in terms of insights that, you know, if it would depend on us going through the code and thinking about all the possibilities of inputs to potentially causing an error, especially when you go all the way through the stack, you know, you can't do that. like it's just too time consuming. So if you have your code really well structured and you using fuzzing for that, it's just a win-win. So, like, for example, here we have a list of all our fuzzes at the moment, and then you can see how many executions we have on things that are really kind of targeted, is a specific scope, and we're targeting, that specific, function, as opposed to when we go to, some cases that is the entire controller, and then, the coverage is not great, because again, like it is, yeah, it's a lot harder for you to exercise all the execution flows on that kind of approach. So, but yeah, to be honest, I think I will definitely follow this up with a talk just about the native fuzzing, or actually fuzzing overall, and especially the great things about the native fuzzing. But we'll cover that on a follow-up session. I think that will be beneficial for all the maintainers and the community as a whole. Cool. All right, so that is that on the fuzzers here. Just on giving like a high level overview on other things are in progress. We're doing a lot, we're focusing a lot on the consolidation of Git implementations. So Sanskar has been testing quite a bit the new changes, especially with the new package. That's going on really well. I think that will benefit the project massively. So hopefully soon we'll have a release candidate version of the branch of this of these changes, so other folks can test. At the minute, just Sanskar and I are testing it, but as soon as we have something that we're happy with, we will share for other folks to test. So yeah, the more people on this, the better, which actually also reminds me of something that we stumbled in today. We found some issues with our dashboard. I'll actually just show that quickly as well, because I think that's kind of related. It's always good for folks to bear that in mind. So we found some memory issues while testing, and we noticed that our memory usage panel is not considering memory that is not within Go. So for example, especially for image automation controller and for source controller, that we have dependencies that are in C or are activated via CGO. What happens is, this is not computed here, so you can't really tell that there is a memory leak. And this was a problem ages ago when we had like Go routines leaking in C, but it wasn't showing here. So it took some users to actually tell us. So yeah, this is something we need to fix. So just bear in mind when investigating anything or you're testing new changes that is a problem we have. Yes, on top of that, we have quite a few great things going on the rewriting. Hide is working on the Helm controller. There's a lot of progress on that. I'm really happy on the changes that are happening. We don't have a RC on that yet, but I think we should have that soon, probably towards the end of this month. The same goes to the image reflector controller. I had some chats with Sunny today. Well, not only today, but the latest on this was today, and that is also looking really good. So again, we should be able to see something evolving on that front really soon. Any questions on that? All right. On the back of another issue that we created recently on the Crd validations, I created this issue a while ago, and then Santosh started proposing a PR on some of the validation. So yeah, if someone wants to have a look on the proposed PR, please take a look and feedback accordingly. I caught up with him offline as well. And given that this a lot of changes that we need to do. Ideally, we do, type by type with tests for each one of the new validation, just to make sure we're validating the right things. This will take a while, I think, until we kind of merge all the changes, but it's very important we do this before GA. So yeah, I'll definitely ask everyone to keep an eye on this. There's a lot going on the OCI front. I don't know if anyone wants to talk specifically about OCI. Someone that is on the call that is probably closer to the subject, but otherwise on my side, that would be that. Anyone wants to talk about the OCI?
Yeah, I can talk about it.
Go for it.
We have a fix for the OCI authentication part, where, so in the RFC, we are saying that if you specify a provider, let's say AWS, which means the controller should look up the context for getting the authorization token, but you also specify secret reference to us, I don't know, image pool secret, the controller should choose the image pool secret. And this currently doesn't happen. We prioritize the provider. I mean, there is a whole mix, like we keep adding secrets, secret image pool secrets attached to the service accounts and the provider, all of them together, and we try to fetch with all the things that we have available, right? And this kind of contradicts what the RFC said. Why it's important to prioritize the secret references from a multi-tenancy perspective. Let's say you use namespaces as tenant boundaries, and there is a single controller, right? So if you bind the controller to a specific IAM role, then all the tenants will only have access to that ECR instance. But what about their own instances, right? They don't want to share their instances with other tenants and so on, so they'll probably set up a secret ref. And we don't take that into consideration. And that's fixed. There are also some tests around that. I've asked Sunny to do a last look over the pull request, and this will be included in the next Flux patch release. Another thing that's ongoing is also around authentication. We have a first-time contributor, which is adding contextual authentication to the Flux CLI. So with the Flux CLI, you can, push, list, pull, tag artifacts. And how the CLI works, it discovers the Docker config file on your file system, and it uses that config file. But what if you run the Flux push command on a VM which is hosted on a cloud provider? We force you to generate a Docker config file using, I don't know, the AWS CLI, gcloud, and so on, right? So instead of doing this, we already have the code that, takes the authentication from the context. And addition to this is basically we will have the provider field as a flag now in the CLI for Flux push artifact, tag artifact, and so on. And when you set the provider to Azure, then you tell the CLI, hey, you are running on an Azure managed machine. Look up the authentication yourself, so people don't have to, generate these Docker configs before they can run the Flux command, which is a nice feature in a way that you don't need the Docker CLI or anything like that on that machine, only the Flux CLI to push securely artifacts to manage container registries. And lastly, we haven't moved much on the Cosign verification front. That pull request has not moved much. So yeah, there we are stuck waiting on contributors to make the code build first of all, and then add tests to it. That's on OCI front. I've been doing some experimentations on my own with OCI, and I don't think we have the right UX for actually using Flux in a Gitless mode, where you only use OCI as the single source of truth for everything that happens on the cluster. So maybe next month I will do a short presentation on my experiments and get some feedback from everyone where we should drive Flux forward to enable this, if we want to enable this. Maybe we don't want to. But anyway, that's Rashid.
Hi, Stefan. Nice to meet you. It's my first time meeting you on a Zoom call in person. I've worked with you on a little bit of that OCI reconciler implementation, and I wanted to also let you know on this open issue that's been worked on for the Cosign verification. There's another contributor that has actually taken the lead on this. We were both assigned to it, and I had a few conversations with him, and he wants to lead that effort, and I'm kind of on the bystander side, help me, let me know what I can help with, and I will help. But so far, I haven't heard back from him in the last few days. So that's kind of where the status of the Cosign verification is. It's in my past, I worked with you, and we got things moving fairly quickly. I will reach out to him again, and if he's wanting to, kind of start a new PR, because I can't access his work and do much of addressing the comments that are outstanding on the PR.
Yeah, he can add you as an external contributor to his fork, and you can definitely push there. But yeah, we need to figure out a way forward, because that looks very stuck to me, and I'm really concerned about not running make test or anything like that, just pushing code upstream.
I noticed that too.
It's kind of troubling. I mean, it takes my time on reviewing stuff that doesn't build or doesn't pass the test, which feels like
not the best use of your time. No, totally agree. Understand. That's we can. I'm gonna see if I can reach out to him. If not, we can start maybe a different PR.
Yeah, we can. Let's talk on the Flux contributors channel with everybody involved and decide how to move forward.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. And
Thank you.
after you guys are done, I have one more thing I'd like to discuss, but I'll wait for my turn.
Cool.
And it's very nice meeting you, Stefan, and everybody else too. Hello, everyone.
Sure.
I think the only other item on the topic is on the agenda is this enable TLS for source artifacts to download your own source controller.
Okay. Yes.
So I think it's go for it.
All right. Thank you. All right. Well timing. I think there is there is a GitHub discussion, and part of the discussion also kind of sprinkled over into the Flux channel. I really appreciate the feedback. I opened up a GitHub discussion, trying to follow the process, like, just don't want it to go and start sticking in a issue. So the discussion is to enable TLS for the download endpoints that source controller provides to any downstream consumers of source controller. And I understand what I suggested or proposed was not the best solution. The problem is, I think, real. The solution may be one of the solutions that's been discussed is to use a mesh, service mesh, which absolutely is the first thing that jumped out in our mind too, when we just even before we from our use case perspective, we wanted to even propose this. But there are our customers who are also sometimes not wanting to run a mesh because of number of reasons, and so this was the alternate to still provide some level of TLS enabled, so in transport the data is secure. So I want to update my proposal, Stefan, and I want to definitely not use any external dependency like Cert Manager or modifying the API, but I want to update it where an HTTPS will be endpoint will be enabled as long as the secret with the cert is provided, and then we can make the client just to talk to the HTTPS rather than to the HTTP URL that's exposed through the artifact type. Couple things we don't want in this case. We were not going to advertise or broadcast the HTTPS URL as a because that is probably more invasive, the change, backward compatibility, breaking change, etc. So and I can update the write-up with that, there is going to be two servers that source controller implementation will have. One is going to be that HTTPS, another one is going to be the HTTP, the existing one, and HTTPS will be called by clients who wants to connect to HTTPS, and rest will continue to talk to the HTTP endpoint. I wanted to get some thoughts of if you have a minute or two to share some of your guidance on this. I want to update the write-up, but with if you have some
I think
thoughts, that would be great.
If we go with an approach like Contour does, where at install time it spins up a job that provisions TLS as a secret. The secret gets mounted in all consumers and origin source controller. And it's not only about source controller. I mean, what about notification control?
True.
Why would we secure the source and not the notification? Or the receivers, or everything that notification controller does, right? I mean, events should all also go over HTTPS if we decide that all controllers should talk HTTPS. So there is the advertising of the notification controller is not done through custom resources, is done through config flags. So every Flux controller at startup receives a flag where the notification controller address is, and in there it should be switched from HTTP to HTTPS, and notification controller should follow the same pattern we decide for source controller. Right? I mean, I'm not for securing only source controller, because why is that more important than events, where in events you see like the whole diff of apply logs is like as
Yeah.
sensitive as source control, right?
Absolutely.
So that's one point. I think your proposal should touch both servers. We have two HTTP servers in Flux. One is the source controller, one the file server, and one is the HTTP API of notification controller. So we should have like this, I don't know, shared package where these both controllers will be able to create a parallel secure server on a different port, of course. So we need to modify all the deployment spec, everything, right? Mount the volumes, make that optional. So that's a lot of work on the Flux CLI side, on testing, on how we build a manifest, everything like that. And of course, this should come as a flag, as an opt-in flag for Bootstrap, right? If people want to switch to HTTPS tomorrow because they only use Flux, no third-party controllers, then they should be able to do that, right? Now, for the switching to HTTPS by default, I think we need to give people time. Like,
Yes.
First, we'll set up HTTP in the source controller custom resources, even if we also spin up the HTTPS one. Then we need to, serve files on both.
Yes.
Receive events on both on notification controller. And at some point, announce the community, hey, we are doing the switch. If you have third-party controllers, you give them a deadline, I don't know, 3 months or whatever, when the HTTP servers will be closed. Now, my concern with this, so this is like, okay, we can have a job like Contour does. Maybe we can reuse the generator from that project. It's also under CNCF, should be easy to adapt that to Flux. My question is, what happens? So let's say we completely switch to HTTPS. What happens when you add the service mesh?
What was the scenario you just mentioned? I didn't pick that up.
Yeah. Can you repeat that last question, please?
So let's say we switch Flux to HTTPS for source control and notification control, right? Then you enable Istio or Linkerd or Kuma or whatever on the Flux controller. What will happen then? Are we going to feed the certificates to Envoy? Are we going to, integrate with all the service meshes? How are we going?
No, I think that's a very valid question, and my personal opinion, you're not going to do both. You're going to do one or the other. You're either going to not enable the HTTPS on Flux, like you said, you have to opt in, and if you opt in to do that, then you clearly do not need service mesh to secure with MTLS to talk to TLS again. That just, in my opinion, overkill and not necessary. That's what MTLS is supposed to provide.
No, and it will not work, because when customized controller will call the HTTPS endpoint, Envoy will add its certificate and source controller will reject it because it's not the right certificate. I'm not sure. How a service mesh works with HTTPS inside HTTPS?
My understanding that it was completely parallel, right? Because otherwise you would pretty much kill the chain of trust. But one thing that I definitely wanted to mention on this is, I think we probably need to go one step back and even think if we ever want to enable this by default, like, because for example, on the proposal, at least on my side of comments and all, it was more about enabling users to do this, but I don't think we should own the creation of certificates, because this is going to be quite specific to users, the rotation of this and so on. So, you know, I think we can have the capability, like this is the flag, this is how you set whatever secret that contains a TLS cert. However, the responsibility of, you know, creating, generating that, if you folks want to use, you know, tools for that, for example, Search Manager, no, it's up to them. But it's not a Flux problem. The Flux problem is being able to serve over TLS. How that works, then, you know, is for us to, well, it's for the actual user to decide. Which in a way makes our life a lot easier, right? We just need to be able to support, you know, serving over TLS.
Yeah, but
Right.
once we, wait a second. So if we don't manage anything and we allow someone to mount a cert in source controller, when the cert gets rotated, what happens? Everything will fail.
It's pretty much like across other applications, right? So companies that have this, you know, that they need to operate like an enterprise, and they need, you know, SSL or TLS across all their fleet. They resolve this problem already, either by using a service mesh, or they, you know, they have some automation, or they should have some automation that deals with that. I think bringing that into us, we probably would have to own, you know, the whole end-to-end to do this securely, which we could, but I just think is a lot more effort for not as much value add as just having TLS. Because, for example, given that we own the communications, we could have a secret that we share with the other controllers, and we establish MTLS based on that. We could do that. But again, you have already service meshes that does that, you know, to a whole different level. Is it worth us going down that path? I'm not sure.
So you are proposing for what? Our controllers to watch a secret, and if that secret is there, mount it and start the HTTPS server?
Well, it depends how it would be, you know, received. Like if it's a reference, well, yeah, of a secret, or is a mounted path, whatever it is, it would be at start time, right? Sorry?
Because it's a big difference. Because if it's a mounted path, then the controller cannot react to changes, because that's a symlink that gets updated. You change the secret now, and kubelet has about 5 minutes to update the mounted secret inside all the pods. So while those 5 minutes pass, source control, let's say, by chance, everything is eventual consistent in Kubernetes. Let's say source controller gets the new value of the secret. Everything will fail from that moment on.
Yeah, but again, like this is a way greater problem, right? Because, for example, there is the revocation of certs. Like there is the CA trust of all the consumers of that cert. The problem is not just the serving controller being able to, you know, reset once a new cert is around. If you have a whole new CA, like a issuing certificate authority, that means that all the consumers need to also have a, you know, to be updated.
Yeah.
So that's why I think we should not own the problem to that level. We can say, look, this is how, you know, we support it. This is some documentation on how to enable it. The whole end-to-end, I think users have to, you know, to own it. Because, for example, for public certificates, it's quite straightforward, right? You don't need to change the CA across all the consumers. But for self-signed or, you know, custom PKIs, how would we want the users to actually, you know, consume that? So this is, you know, it's kind of, I created an issue for us to create an RFC just for that, for example, because at the moment we allow users to, per object, define a CA bundle for specific things, or for example, for SSH to define non-hosts. But we probably want to do things that, you know, controller level, especially when you're talking about multi-tenancy, we don't want for a tenant to be able to say, github.com is actually this other thing here. Because again, it's just open for some issues. So the whole story about trust we need to review. We can do that in two separate parts. One is serving TLS given a search that the user provides. On the consumer part, we also need to review what would be the best approach to do that. I definitely think that we need to do something at the very least at controller level as well. How that is reset, like how would the controllers understand that there was a change? We'll probably need to kind of think about the different options as we go through that as well.
Yeah, so we cannot offer a flag to Bootstrap, because if we offer a flag to Bootstrap for HTTPS, but we don't generate the secret, we don't deal with rotation, we don't deal with trust, that's mocking our users. It's like, we cannot do this. We either do it properly and we build, I don't know, we dedicate half a year on building all of this inside Flux, or we don't do it at all. I'm not for, let's allow people to do this, break their head, advertise it, and then we'll have like tons of people on Slack saying, this is broken, this doesn't work, it doesn't rotate my secret, and so on, right? So yeah, I'm not sure what the solution is.
Can we like mount a secret into a source controller and in a volume and watch any change, so we can do the certificate rotation and there's a change to the secret?
As I said, mounts have a 5 minutes delay and is not consistent. So if source controller remounts the secret, customized controller will have the old secret because kubelet hasn't got to update the symlink in there, the whole of Flux will fail for 5 minutes.
Well, not only that, right? So there's the other side again, like the consuming, like, because that is, you have to issue that for every single consumer, like
Consumer.
Yes.
So again, like just that, like if we take into account what you mentioned, Stefan, of the 5 minutes delay, if they are slightly overlapping, actually almost staggering, that means that you actually have 9 minutes and a bit in which a lot of controllers could stop working. That's why I think we can't do end-to-end, like we can't own that process. We can, support users that are doing it, because again, we have to remember those CA bundles, well, the CA authority, most of the times they're created for years, right? So you probably would reprovision your cluster before you actually reprovision your CA authority. The TLS certs depends on kind of users. Sometimes are months based, sometimes are years as well, which again, it might not be a problem at all. But that's why I'm saying we should not own that. Because if the user does, they do that, and they know they do that every year or every 3 months or however long they want to do that, and they want to do that in parallel to redeploying the cluster, there's no problem. Like we're saying that there's a problem that there isn't for that specific use case. So that's why the most important thing is, okay, what would this look like in terms of our side? And then the whole end-to-end, we can give one recommendation, but then users have to own it.
So to summarize, Rashid, we should, in your proposal, we should have a clear view of what means securing the connection, what bits must be changed in all the Flux manifests, and what things we need to add, minimal things we need to add to controllers so they can be switched by users without Bootstrap or anything to customize patches or whatever, having their own Flux distribution, how they can switch to HTTPS. I'm guessing, creating new servers on different ports, have flags all over the place, and so on. It's quite.
Yeah. And I fully understand what I'm asking in this enhancement or feature is like, you know, the initial scope that Stefan you explained. I can see, like, you know, that makes, like, you know, as a solution, not just like, you know, a section of Flux that can do HTTPS, TLS communication. It's like, you know, the entire Flux suite. And that definitely the scope is a much bigger scope and a longer term. And your earlier question, I wanted to get back to it. In my opinion, if you're going to enable HTTPS or opt into HTTPS, hopefully you're not also going to be running this in mesh at the same time. If you're running mesh, you run mesh and just don't opt into HTTPS because you no longer need that. That's not necessary. Or so you're either running mesh or you're running. You can run Flux with HTTPS enabled. That's how I view it. I wouldn't recommend users to do both at the same time. That is going to be a difficult problem to solve because the mesh issuer, MTLS issuer, and the Flux issuer may be two different issuers, and the certs may not be trusted by each other. So that's my quick recommend. Like, you know, might come back to that question. And the second is, like, you know, in a contained scope, to what Paolo is suggesting, can we do something at a source controller level, which is also what you ended your comment with? What can we do in source controller where the user provides, user takes the ownership and the maintenance responsibility of rotating the cert and making this cert available, so we enable that extra server with HTTPS in source controller. It does make the code look a little with this if then else, like, you know, it's not a very smooth flow, but those are some of the quick recommendations after hearing and thinking about some of the feedbacks that I've seen.
So from your initial proposal, we definitely do not want to change anything in the status. We don't want to have hundreds and thousands of, you know, CA bundle replicas all over.
Right.
We don't want to change the API in any way. The only change should be, instead of HTTP, it should be HTTPS, and then the clients should know what to do. Of course, source controller service has to, you know, expose the second.
Is it okay to keep both servers alive? Like, you know, we only enable the HTTPS if there is a cert provided. Otherwise, we don't even enable that. And if you do provide one, then we still run the HTTP server as well as the HTTPS. I just, like, you know, the consuming clients within the cluster, I want to play it nice and give them a chance to upgrade to HTTPS rather than forcing them to say, okay, because you upgraded to Flux version X and we enabled this HTTPS, any existing client that used to consume source controller download URL will no longer be able to do that. In my opinion, that's a breaking change, and all consumers may not be ready. So would you be willing to, like, you know, have two servers being listened in two different port, HTTP and HTTPS? Would that be?
Just one point on that, right? Like the biggest problem of having that is that first would be quite hard to tell for sure that that communication is being used securely across the board. If you have an HTTP endpoint, what do we mean as well? Like, you'll be receiving whatever we're receiving. So for example, the notification point, like all that information in plain text. So you don't actually really have the benefit from, it's like pretty much Kubernetes API, right? For a very long time, they were running both in parallel, the HTTP and the HTTPS. And it took a very long time for them to be able to deprecate the HTTP one.
HTTP.
Because folks were, using it. I think if folks are using HTTPS, they're using HTTPS. Like, it will, we have to think what would be the impact of migrating folks. We could do things like trying to do a permanent redirect.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is you still receiving the request on HTTP. So it's still in plain text. For notification controller would be exactly as before. So consumers would still be sending things in the open, which it would be open for man in the middle and stuff like that, just as they are. So yeah.
Okay. So if I hear the argument is to, and it's valid, it's to do either HTTP or HTTPS, don't do both, because then what's the benefit of doing HTTPS?
Yeah. I mean, also for redirects, that's a very good point. The payload will reach HTTP,
Clear.
then we tell it, hey, we don't want you to talk to us HTTP. But in the meantime, if someone has a, I don't know, TCP dump between the nodes, they will see the payload. So there is a false impression of security, right? I prefer to not give any false impression of security, saying like, hey, it's up to you to secure it, run it in a mesh, then tell people, oh, now it's HTTPS, but in fact it's not, because everything is sent first over HTTP, then HTTPS, which means like deceiving users that, oh, that's safe, when in fact it's not really safe.
Yeah, no, I understand that comment. Yeah, my comment was also like, how do I enable this thing without breaking my existing clients? But I think once you enable this, you have to own up to make your clients be also talk TLS, HTTPS, not just source controller. Okay. So, but in that source controller repo, or in the source, you said there are two servers. I'm not very close to the other server. I'm close to the source controller, the file server. I've seen the code for it. So when we do, if we propose this, we will have to propose to make the change for both of the serving endpoints within the source controller manager, correct?
No, there are two. Well, there are two servers inside Flux. One in notification controller and one in source controller.
I see. So I mean, is the scope going to require to say we go with this proposal that will also require to make that same capability in notification controller as well?
Yeah, notification controller is way easier, right? Because endpoint advertising is done through controller flags, not custom resources. So you can just change it, but you can't change sources. Like, let's say you install Flux, which is HTTP, then you deploy 1,000 apps, 1,000 sources. Then you decide, oh, I want HTTPS. Who will update 1,000 sources in etcd to change it from HTTP to HTTPS? Because it's persisted there.
So this have to be like, this is almost like you have to decide before you use Flux source controller to build your world.
When you restart source controller has to have some code in every single reconciler that compares the status with the new desired state of the status, and the new desired state is, hey, Now it's HTTPS. So at startup, source controller will do thousands and thousands of updates.
Yeah.
Which is not great, but
yeah.
So that's why I'm saying source control is way harder to make this change in source control, right? Another option is you don't change anything in status.
Just one point, right? So on the source controller, the migration path is actually easier, right? Because it's not a problem to receive, to do a redirect on that case, because the payload, the request is just the artifact. So the consumer is not actually sending any sensitive information, it's just actually asking for the path. So we could have a redirect there.
Yeah, it's a post.
Yeah.
HTTP post.
And
sorry, HTTP get for source control, HTTP post for notification control. So yes, in notification controller, doing the redirect will not help. Yeah. In source controller, yes, it will help because you only see the URL in plain text, which anyway, it's in the custom resource.
Yeah, and then what we mean is that the migration path that is quite straightforward, and then on notification, we just make sure that we don't receive HTTP. On source controller, we would, and then just do a permanent redirect.
Yeah, doing the permanent redirect saves us from DDoSing etcd at startup. Because I really don't like the idea of rewriting, patching all the sources. Imagine you have a management cluster and Flux does not only manage the cluster itself, it manages hundreds of other clusters with remote targeting. It needs to update like potentially tens of thousands of things. It will be like a very impactful switch at scale. So yeah, for source control, right, redirect using a flag. So you set the flag, secure or secure file server or whatever it's called. And that should change both servers, right? First, you start the HTTPS one, you mount the cert from the volume, and then you reconfigure the HTTP server to do the redirect to the HTTPS one.
HTTPS. And the other part, like, if we don't change anything in the status artifacts, like, where the URL will change from HTTP to HTTPS in your use case that you were explaining, you have 1,000 applications started with HTTP, and then you restarted source controller with HTTPS. Now you have these 1,000 reconcile that needs to happen, which is true. And like, that's another good point. I don't know if it's a good point, but a point towards, like, managing both servers, but like HTTP and HTTPS. So the clients that want to talk HTTPS can't talk to HTTPS, versus enforcing that status change, which is like, a big tsunami effect of change within the amount of resources that source controller have to reconcile. Is that a good enough reason to run both, or should we consider the ultimate?
So we always run the HTTP server in source controller. If the flag is secure, or however we call it, then that server will only do redirects to the HTTPS one, right? Okay. Now, in the clients, the client will see HTTP, will call HTTP, will receive a redirect to HTTPS, and it will do the upgrade using the client mounted inside with the CA, or not at all if the certificate is issued from a CA which is already in Alpine. But you can also have a flag in all the consumers, and they will not try to do HTTP at all. They'll just do
Go
HTTPS.
to
And it's
HTTPS
up to you to
directly.
migrate your consumers to
Mhm.
HTTP through another flag. Now, what worries me is that we are talking about all these things that needs to be built inside all the Flux controllers. So we need an end-to-end solution to test this, no
Yeah.
matter what we do,
It's very
right?
true.
And there is also the issue of changing manifests of all our controllers, services. We need to add new ports and so on, right? Where is that going to happen? It needs to be in each controller repo, right? Because otherwise we cannot test them together. So we cannot say, here is a guide, do it yourself. We have to do the changes everywhere on our own to be able to just test it.
And that's one of the concerns. It's like, the scope is like, doing it the right way. The scope is pretty big. It's a very I feel like a naive and a simple ask, but to do it right across the Flux suite probably is a much bigger ask than it sounds like in the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, if we say Flux can run an HTTPS server and all the consumers can connect to it through over HTTPS, and we have that in our docs, we need tests for that. We need to make sure if we change something to source controller or whatever, we are not going to break this feature. How can we make sure? We have to have an end-to-end test suite that tests all of this. So we need to, yes, right? So we need to have all this sorted out. Where, I mean, I don't know, can envision now all the changes just to the Kubernetes manifests, because there are a lot, right? Are we going to hard code a secret name so we can have these volumes everywhere? Or this is, I don't know, some admission controller that sees the Flux deployment, then injects volumes and all of that? How is that going to work? I don't even know the changes just to mount that and set the flags and add ports to services, add ports to the deployment. We can't have 443 in the deployment because we run non-root. Right?
Yeah, we could, yeah. It definitely
Other port and 443 needs to be in the service and so on, right? So there are many things to think about.
No,
Not
for sure.
just,
One thing that I was going to think about, I definitely think we raised a lot of very important questions. It would be good to enumerate them so we can start going through this discussion on, like, these are the open questions and these are the discussions on each one of those, just to kind of agree where we are in each one of them. I think that to some extent, this issue that I'm sharing just here now, and I'll also put on the document, I think this is related to this to some extent, because we would have to define, DCA bundle across the controllers anyway, which is that, what I mentioned before, but that feels almost like a CRF by itself, which is how the consumers trust on a custom, CA. So yeah, that is something that feels like a bit of a dependency on this. But yeah, I definitely think we have a lot to talk about about this subject. It's not going to be like a 2 minutes chat. That's it.
It's security is typically we had a similar discussion with our security team, and we were discussing this, maybe not to the same context of Flux suites, but overall, like, why this endpoint is not secured, why is it not HTTPS? So it's a very long conversation, and you're correct. We need to we had to go down through a number of different questions to answer why they should not accept it. And so that was their reasoning of not accepting. So I'm definitely going to re-listen to this session and update my questions and comments in the discussion. And but by any stretch, I get the feeling this may be more involved, and a decision is not going to be super quick on this.
Yeah, we definitely need to see how Flux changes from operational point of view, what changes we need to do at the deployment level. We need to see that. An example of it, we need to patch this deployment, we need to do that, we need to add this flag, we need to patch this service and so on. Then we need to see what changes need to be done to the source code, right? Add flags, start a new server, do redirects. Is Go suitable to do this type of redirects? What happens? Does it really work? If we spin up 2 different servers, I'm not sure if it will work that fine. We need to see. Is the Go client, does the Go client pass through? I mean, is the upgrade handled by Go HTTP client? Do we need to run some custom things in there? How complicated is that? There are many things, right? So anyway, we decided we are not going to deal with cert rotation and so on. We expect
right.
that, you know, before you deploy Flux, someone creates the Flux system namespace, labels it correctly so it maintains all the things that we already do there. And inside the Flux system namespace, it creates a secret with the TLS cert. We don't want to deal with that part. What we want to know is what happens next from this moment on. There is a secret in our namespace, how we make it happen.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
all.
we are
This
way
is-
over time.
We're way over time. I was going to say that, like, you know, I brought up a very complex topic, and I think it's a topic that I'd like to continue discussing, and these are great, like, you know, thoughts to think ahead and before we go and just doing a
Just on that
little bit of
point,
code.
I went through quite a few of the things we discussed. I put down the document so you can, you know, just check if there's anything else that I missed, just to make sure that the points that we agreed on or the things that we need to consider are there. So feel free to extend. I know we are running out of time, but I think there's a quick point which I don't know who wants to cover that. Is that your Kingdom?
I didn't put it there, no.
Or Vanessa, maybe?
Yeah, I just put the upcoming CNCF webinars, one on the 15th and another on the 29th of September, and the links are available in the agenda.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you guys. I've enjoyed the meeting today.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everybody. You guys have a nice day.
Thank you.
Nice home.
And sorry if I destroyed your whole session today by bringing this
Don't worry.
topic. I
It was actually
apologize,
really
but
good.
I think it's something we want to at least learn and understand. Can this be done? And if it's done, what's the right way?
Yeah, and to be honest, I think it's awesome. We need to be discussing those things. I'm pretty sure all the folks have the same problem. So yeah, feel free to bring up other stuff as well.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Lisa. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.